In this particular session, I want to think about upgrades, and I want to think about long-tail upgrades. Sometimes we are confronted with systems that have been in place for a very long time. Sage CRM is now a very well-established product in market. I joined Sage when it was version 3.85, 2.85, in sometime in the year 2001. So I've been with the company for a very long time. I've seen the product for a very long time. And when you are trying to upgrade from a system that is outside of the support, then it can be quite a daunting task. And sometimes we look around for things that will help us, Harry Potter-like devices that will somehow make that experience much easier, much simpler. There is no magic wand that will remove the problems associated with inheriting an existing system with unknown customizations and incomplete project documentation. There's going to be no magic wand, but there are several things that can start to mitigate the problem. Now, imagine you are a new system administrator. You've come into a customer site and you are trying to work out what needs to be done to allow for an upgrade. Or you find yourself as a business partner starting to think about an upgrade for a system that you've never worked with before, and you're not particularly familiar with Sage CRM either. So imagine you're a new consultant. So I said there's no magic wand, but there are several things that we can do. And the first thing that we know we can do is to take stock. Now, in an ideal world, there'll be a full service history of a customer implementation. That's going to be it. That, in an ideal world, you'd have a full set of documentation about what the original system was like. That's the initial project documents. These should exist. Then there will be ones which are supposed to describe the scope of the customization and then listing all of the business rules and workflows that have been implemented. And there'd also be follow-up documents that describe what has happened over the course of that particular system's life cycle, to be able to describe any later customizations or changes that have been made, as well as the upgrades that have been in place. Now, if you're lucky, you will have levels of customization that will include documentation about how the screens have changed, how the data within the data base has changed, and perhaps even a data model as well. Or you'll have their equivalents. Now, Sage CRM does, within the Help Center, provide some documentation around the way in which implementation takes place and some guidance on the types of documents that you should be holding. And there is actually some resources as well up on the community, where we've got partner documentation that can be downloaded and used. But the reality is that Sage CRM is a very plastic and easily changed system, and system administrators and consultants can make ad hoc changes that cause the system to drift away from how it was originally defined. From a person who's trying to help a customer with an upgrade, a consultant, it can be a profoundly unsettling experience to discover that a system is documented to have one set of customizations, but in reality may have a very different set of configurations. Now, you can gather all of the documents that are available. You can read and understand what the system was originally like, but when facing an upgrade or an extension project, you still need to know what the system is really like and what changes have been made. So if you think about that in terms of any negotiation, you have to trust the documents, but you also need to verify. And the thing that won't lie to you is actually the system itself. It will be what it is. Now, in order to create a starting point for you, you'll need to create a baseline. You'll need to understand what an instance of Sage CRM that was completely uncustomized would look like, and then be able to make a detailed comparison from that unmodified system with the system with which you're working, with which you're confronted when you're attempting an upgrade or a further development. So where does it start? Well, Sage CRM is a metadata-driven system. So the place to be able to start thinking about any baseline is to start inside the database. You can examine the metadata to tell you which screens, lists, and fields have been added, and which have been changed or had scripts or rules added to them, and where calls to ASP pages or .NET assemblies have been made inside the system. So you can get a comprehensive survey of all of the changes away from the baseline system. Now, Sage CRM publishes a small collection of SQL scripts that can be used to investigate changes between a vanilla database and a customized one. It gives you a sense of the ideas of what can be done to investigate the differences between the two systems. And you can find these up on the community, not Sage City, but rather the community. So I'll put a link in the presentation. Now, that set of example scripts, they will report any new interactive dashboards that have been added in, new gadgets that have been added in, new reports, new system actions, new constraints that might have been added into the database. The idea of how tables, views, and fields have changed, either fields that have been added in or adapted in some way. You'll see any of the new structures inside the database as well. That is very, very important when trying to work out what the baseline, the difference between the baseline is, what tables, what fields are in the system, and how have they changed as well. So there are any questions about new workflows as well. So these are all examples of some of the changes that can be made to a system. And of course, you can use these to expand any aspect of the system as well. So as an example of those sorts of scripts that are available, you could find out which fields have had scripts added to them, which are the ones with table level scripts, etc. And once you have your baseline and you're secure in your understanding of the state of the system, that is, you're confident that you understand how all of its business rules work, or at least where they're defined, and so there you get a sense of the extent of the existing customization. You then need to consider what any specific upgrade of the system requires. Now you're going to have to think about, as we approach upgrade, you're going to need to think about the changes to supported environments, the browsers, the server software, the office software, even the database version that you're working with. Now, Sage CRM publishes a hardware and software requirements document, and the release notes for each version should be essential reading. So if you want to avoid pain, this is a good way of being able to make sure that you cut out pain so that you've read all of those documents. There are materials available. Do check out the fact that we've got an upgrade guide video. There are upgrade guides as well inside the community. There are a lot of things that you need to be aware of when you're coming to an upgrade. Like, don't ever assume that it's okay to just upgrade without taking without logging into each of the versions. So if you're going through several long chains, make sure that you have added in the added in the necessary steps. I would add I'd add 2 points. One, there has been quite a lot of interest in Longtail. We've been getting quite a lot of issues up into L3 support and then coming through into, I've had sight of that as well and looking at advice around upgrades, especially for heavily customized systems. It is so important that people follow the upgrade path as advertised. Yeah. So if you are upgrading a customer from, say, Sage CRM 7.1, then you do need to upgrade in the steps that are indicated and doing those not just within the test environment, but also doing it in the production environment in the same way. So that would include signing on after each step as you do that. It is just something that we have to be mindful of, is that people can very often follow the correct steps as documented within a test environment, and it will work, and then they won't necessarily follow exactly the steps within the production environment because they don't think that the things that were documented documented are all important, yet they are all important. They are. So as you do things through, because this Sage CRM is a metadata driven product, some of that metadata setting takes place when you log on. So if it asks you between each individual upgrade step to log on as the system administrator, you have to do it in order to make sure that the metadata is correct. And the other thing that I would do is make sure that you upgrade as soon as possible, because the knowledge, if you think about your partners and their consultancy base, tell them to upgrade their customers as soon as possible, because the knowledge that those partners will have for an earlier version is evaporating all the time as staff leave. So you won't, if you don't have somebody who has gone through the upgrade process between 7.1 and 7.3, you're in a bad place when it comes to taking a customer all the way up from 7.1 to Sage CRM 2022 R2.
So I think that's
because there are some big jump points. And it's just making sure that this is addressed as soon as possible. Although I would actually say, if somebody is using Sage CRM 7.1 nowadays, really tell them to upgrade.
It's a long time out.
There's a lot of stuff that will be just security vulnerabilities, which are not CRM vulnerabilities, but general system vulnerabilities. Now, the last thing that I want to mention is every Sage CRM instance has a particular life cycle. When we are implementing Sage, or when we release Sage CRM from development, it is designed to be supported for a number of years, and this is not because Sage is dedicated to the idea that you should be constantly upgrading for the sake of upgrading. It's rather we're working in complex environments in which things like the operating systems which we're working in, like the transport layer security that we're working in, is changing. We find in releases that things like Adobe Flash drops out of support that we've been using, or aspects that there is a security vulnerability that is identified that we are resolving within particular releases. These are all things that need to be taken into account, and when you come to it, well, that's really why you need to upgrade and be able to think through what it needs to be done when confronted with long tail upgrades.